Testing, testing. Yeah, right. I think I got the sound all working all good. So, hello! Welcome to Creative Writing Part 3. Thank you all for joining us here today. I have put together this little presentation for a storyboarding session because we are going to do a what's it called? Tales of the Trespassers. I keep talking about it, but now we're actually going to talk a bit more about it. One of the things I wanted to do on stream originally was host a Tales of the Trespassers story time. But now that I'm hosting a creative writing class and I got a cool idea for a new story, I figured we would go through it since I think it has a lot of potential for a one-off storytelling session. So, um, welcome class. My name is Captain Nathaniel Wilhelm. I will be your teacher and your pirate captain for today. So, while we're waiting for people to join, and just to jump right into it, for the people that are here, what we're going to cover today. So, as always, who I am and why you should care, a recap on our last class, and then get right into things with no wrong way to do things, examples of other storyboarding I've done outside of this session, uh, and then we're going to start storyboarding with our priority list of the story I want to tell, and then we're just going to throw ideas at a wall. Um, we're going to go over what the story arc is, and then plan our scenes around that. Where we're gonna go over some developments in process and show that things can change even just in the storyboarding process. You don't need to make everything perfect. You can just making things work out as you go along. We're going to talk about the characters inside the story, and then our to-do list going forward. More importantly, my to-do list going forward to get the story rolling, to flesh out a little bit more. So this is a storyboard that I literally made Tuesday night, and this presentation I made last night. So um, in all honesty, there's not a whole lot to storyboarding unless you have a job. It's your job, and you're in an animation field where everything is going to um, like be 100% behind it, and you have to get approved by the higher ups in a room full of collabs. But if you're just writing for fun, it's really easy to just kind of throw something on a wall, throw stuff on a paper, and just kind of get started with a rough draft, and then get started into more rough drafts. You shouldn't be worried about showing your storyboard to anyone who's going to tell you that you're the worst person ever when you when you first write it down. It should be you. It should be yours for your purposes. So, first of all, who I am and why you should care. Like I said, I am Captain Nathaniel Wilhelm. Before I got into streaming, I wrote a bunch. I've been writing for years. I have over 5 canon works that have trespasser lore kind of centered around them to kind of help introduce them, so we could kind of get to this point. They're either finished or mostly finished. I have written over 1 million words of published content in just those 5 works, and many more, and that is not including all the words I wrote for reports and uh, anything else, and all the books I never published, or all the storyboards I never showed anyone. Now, all the notes I ever took, that doesn't include any of those. That is just those 5 canon works. There's over 1 million words. I counted them. I'm pretty good at math, but there is a reason I wanted to go into English teaching. I have my 10,000 hours in and more, just piling up the years of experience that I have sitting in front of a computer, looking at words, reading, and back-to-back efforts on trying to come up with stories. And then, if anything else, If anything else, you don't care about any of that, and you're just here for my experience as a writer with ADHD and for me to tell you that you can do it and it's possible, then awesome. So, just a short recap of what we covered last time. So, um, just be aware that one of the biggest things you'll ever do when plotting stuff out is and writing stories, especially if you get really into it and have a lot of fun with it, is that there is a distinct contrast between what you will prepare and what is shown. So don't get caught up in oversharing everything that you want to talk about, all the lore. Focus on the story you want to tell. And then characters. Most important thing to remember about characters is to have motivations and flaws. Like put them in the story and justify them being in the story, as well as like give them some flaws. None of your characters should be perfect. Um, and focus on that because that creates conflict and it has really good story elements when a character's inherently cowardly or tries to hide their cowardice or many other things can come from that. Are they a kleptomaniac? And a lot of interesting situations can come from that, etc., etc. Setting, world building, and priorities. So, a setting is where your story is going to take place, and your world building, you should have fun with it. But remember that when you're going to tell a story, and if you like intend to tell the story, you need to prioritize your world building. It's all fun and games creating how the world was made and all the gods and all the different factions that are in the world, but the most important things you should prioritize are the setting bits that will impact your character, and prioritize those over like the far-flung histories of thousands of years and way back when. And then scenes. When you plan out a scene, the limitations and what you gotta do. If story is made out of scenes, you just have to figure out what scenes are the most important and put those most important scenes in the story itself. Healthy reminder. Writing is a skill. Never stop writing. I'll say this again and again and again, and to my dying day. If you want to be a writer, just write. Don't keep giving yourself excuses about I didn't make enough of a storyboard. I have no good ideas, or I have these good ideas, but I just don't think they're good enough. Just get started somewhere. Like these are all tools to help you get started somewhere. A lot of people that have OCD, and some people that are ready to jump right into things. The fact is, your first story will never be perfect, and your last story will never be perfect. But your last story will be better than your first story as you continue to improve. It's a skill like anything else, and get better by doing and practicing. So, starting off, we're going to talk about a storyboarding session for one of my newest upcoming stories of Tales of the Trespassers. Whether it gets told or not, I really hope it gets told. I really hope we can go through all of the steps and traverses and even have some live writing sessions going through it. But for now, just know that there is no wrong way to storyboard. There's no specific right way to storyboard. There's no perfect storyboard ever. Storyboards, if anything else, are just a rough draft of what you plan on doing. And for any of you who've ever seen a movie, like any movie that has any depth of it at all, when they plan to do something, it's like a doesn't always go to plans. So just keep that in mind. And if you are going to storyboard, keep in mind that you should be going through trial and error to find out your style, whether you love storyboarding more than writing, whether that just becomes your entire field, or if you're going to storyboard less because you don't need it as much. And then go through as many attempts as it takes. You should have fun storyboarding. You should have just as much storyboarding as you have writing and doing the rest of the process. When it comes down to it, writing is a passion, and you should have fun passionately doing it. If you're not having fun, you need to re-examine what part of the process you're on, and either muscle through it because there are some hard times, or maybe you need to reestablish like the story you're telling or the part of the story you're telling. But ultimately, the story writing should be fun for you, it should be cathartic, and it should be fun. Reading should be fun for your readers. So, here are some examples of some storyboarding sessions I've done. Like, very, very basic. We've actually talked about one of these ideas on a past stream. Um, the Fairy Grove situation where it's the opposite of a dungeon. I wrote down some ideas, uh, kind of just putting my thoughts to a paper. As you see, there's no like real full sentences. It's all kind of just a jumble of words. And at the very end, there's a question because it's an idea. It's what I want to. It's a story I want to tell, but I don't really know where to start. Do I want to talk about the wars against dungeons? Is there more than one grove? Is there like some kind of grove association? Like if you saw Slice of Life of a Slime or whatever the end, reincarnated as a slime. There's a whole demon king court. Like what if there was the same thing for groves? Like what if there were just a bunch of gardeners or whoever together, fairy kings and queens or elves or however decide to plan it out. But what's the motivation of the one group? Where's the story? Where's the conflict? And so those are some ideas I had of just like the story idea segment of a story I wanted to tell, and it is kind of storyboarding, but at the same time, like it's not going winner, but it's a note. It's somewhere where I can look back and be like, okay, these are the ideas I had. These are some of the interesting parts of it. Like, um, if we look at the top there, landscape, these are things that the grove would be able to affect: the water, stone, mana, and weather, things around you, so you'd be able to craft waterways, stone mountainways, mana ley lines, and an effect of weather. And then I was thinking about including like a gotcha system in this one as well because I haven't been able to put it in a story, so I just keep re-rolling it somewhere. But like, what if the uh, how would I break things up as far as like the gotcha system was? Like, what are the things that would come along with it? So I had bugs, which were obviously like any kind of insects that could be added to the grove. Gardeners, predators, and mythicals. Gardeners were essentially herbivores without being so specific. Predators or anything that essentially the predators, self-explanatory, and mythicals would be things like griffins, dragons, Sealy, micro griffins, all those fantasy things. One thing I wanted to come up with was like, what kind of army would I put together? Was it going to be like a nymph army? Were there going to be like nymph soldiers put together to fight off demon raids and that kind of thing? Um, so Another shorter one, which actually has story to it, is the one next to it. Is the reincarnated as the son of a marquis who's engaged to a young girl. X is the older brother, and then is sent off to war for a few years. Becomes second most decorated soldier behind the monstrous Duke. Comes back to find the kingdom is in some internal turmoil, and that his little sister has become this vicious yet beautiful Ojo-sama. This is just me throwing things at a wall, an idea I had because I want a main female lead as the Ojo-sama. I love the villainous tropes, but I've never been able to super include them anywhere except for um, True Love Seventh Kiss. But I kind of want to do one that's more like singular, just a straight up like romance with some political intrigue. But that's kind of where that was. Um, so those are some examples of storyboardings or notes that I've taken, depending on if you want to call them a storyboard or a note. Another thing I've done is I've made an entire lore draft for a character and their backstory for a storyboard. This was for an adventure that was the world is ending, but the villain is retired, is I believe what I called it. Essentially, the main character is the big demon lord, big bad boss guy from another world, and gets reincarnated in the human world, so kind of a reversed isekai setting there. But through like the love and affection of his parents, he kind of normalizes and turns out okay. And then after they pass away because they were old, he starts running their flower shop. And then as he's running this flower shop, which has something to do with the druids, the world ends and portals begin to open as like that old fantasy trope. And then part of what I want to do with this story was, instead of having straight up like hunters versus the monsters, and hunters are anything from like warriors and magicians and archers, I kind of wanted to play it with a different kind of Western modernized setting where the lore of our world versus their world. So I created this organization called Legion, or some fancy name around Legion, but essentially it was vampires, werewolves, and hunters as part of a singular organization that used to be enemies but are now fighting for their planet against these invaders. And they would all kind of come together because of this main character's influences, and he would kind of meet with the werewolf and vampire kings and queens and whatever, and just whoever stopped by and just kind of save them and walk them through the process. And he was just kind of this guy who kind of wanted to run away from it all, but still had his flower shop in the middle of nowhere, but used Instagram and things to talk about monsters and give the rest of the world some heads up on what was going on while advertising his failing flower shop. And so it's going to be kind of a little slice of life comedic journey, but I didn't have a lot of scenes after the. So I did start writing it, but I didn't have a lot of scenes after the initial invasion of the world, and then when the werewolf and vampire leader showed up. I just couldn't figure out how to fit the pieces all together and just didn't have enough material to keep going. And I just kind of had all the backstory, but never really had the middle parts or an ending. Just kind of an interesting concept that I made a lore draft for. So you can go back and watch the VOD and read it and fawn over how amazing I am, but it's really just a bunch of words on a paper of something I want to tell and something I may or may not iron out someday. So, and another thing I do sometimes is sometimes I just get started. Sometimes I just want to tell the story. I don't need a storyboard, and maybe it doesn't have enough ideas behind it. And so this is one of those. And I'll read it to you because it's short. It's a paragraph and a half, maybe. So it says, and I can't even explain what happened. Some dude bro showed up at my house with a box that was clearly labeled for me. I had to sign for it, and so I stupidly brought it into my house and opened it. What greeted me was a woman who was the very definition of a woman. She had full, pouty lips, angled eyes that were as intense as carved gemstones. I was so stunned by her cool beauty that I didn't even recognize she had already reached through the box, grabbed my shirt, and dragged me to the other side. I can't even say what happened. I can't even say what happened, but now I was on the other side of the box, and the woman placed me gently on the ground. Sorry about the barbaric treatment. I was advised to be swift, the woman apologized. You are William Gavino, are you not? Which is just somewhere I started for a story, an adventure that was a mail ordered husband for the Demon Queen in another world. And I don't know if that was going to do a war or anything like that. It was just kind of. My intention was to have it be kind of a cute slice of life, like getting to know each other, like the differences of their cultures, and just kind of a diabetes infused love story between the two. And obviously, I didn't have much more material than that. I had a good idea, but nothing to fill it with. I had a bag, but no gold in it. I had a bag with no potatoes. So, but there's nothing wrong with that. You should be finding inspiration and taking notes everywhere. There's no telling when one of these ideas would turn out to be a great idea, or when you can come back and reuse one of these ideas, or like I keep throwing throw gotcha systems. Like It hasn't happened yet. I haven't released a book with a gacha system, so it's kind of not quite overused, but I've also have a few more other tropes that I want to include in other books. And if I were to publish everything, you would see some commonalities of like, oh my gosh, there are druids and pirates and gotchas and sharp teeth and redheads everywhere. And that's like, and no Joe-samas are like pretty girls with big ringlets, and it's like, okay, yes, but that's because I haven't. These are all pieces to puzzles I haven't fit in like a finished product yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like you should keep working and trucking at things until you have a finished product. Like over, I think like the last 2 years of my job, last time I counted, I had like 20 plus story ideas that had like I had just either been working on or dropped. Like 20 books that I had come up with, either full storyboards or things that I had written out to a page or two. Like, but I had fun doing every second of it. I had fun with everyone, and go back and I have fun going back and reading my own work. A lot of them are really good, solid ideas that just I didn't have enough padding to create a full story. I didn't have a conflict. I didn't have a climax. I didn't have a resolution. I just never wanted them to end, but I never really had any material to get them started. But that's kind of the point of it. Like I go back and I reread my notes, and it's a good idea because you never know when you'll get a new idea from those ideas, or you never know when they'll fade from your memory. Some ideas I've gone back and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had that idea. That's a great idea. One I read last stream was the one about the dude who was had amnesia and was in some kind of Magic Girls plot, but like years later, after things had kind of hit the wall for both the villain and the Magic Girls. Um, but yeah, and you just never know. You never know when you're gonna have a good idea, or when you look back and be like, okay, now I have something to fill that with. Now I really want to roll with this. So there's never a bad idea, a better bad time to write notes down, to take notes, to do fake storyboards, to do real storyboards. I don't even know what the difference would be. Um, but yeah, so let's get started. So, as I mentioned last time, one of the things you got to do is you got to prioritize. So, what is the story you want to tell? So, essentially, I threw everything on a piece of paper and was like, okay, I'm going to do a storyboard. Let's talk about my process going through the storyboard. So, I just jotted down as much as I knew as quick as I can. So, here is what I know. Some of these things don't even have, some of these people, some of these places don't even have names yet. But what's the story I wanted to tell? So, starting off, what I wanted to tell, the idea I had came from a TikTok about a guy and a girl in modern day like suits, and there was some intense song going on, and their eyes glowed like they were about to start a fight, and I was like, ooh. Those could be two trespassers. Like, how can I use this? And I had all this kind of ideas welling up in me, and so this kind of all fruition from like one. I don't even know if it was TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever, but it came from somewhere, and I just couldn't go back and find it. So I wrote everything down as quick as I could so I didn't lose it because I couldn't find my source material. So I wanted it to be a high octane story about trespassers. I decided it's going to be in the third person just so there's that kind of like ambiguity about who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, because there's not really that. Because I wanted to do kind of a heist and spy game genre feel to it. Scenes I have to include if I want it to be like a really good heist. Um, is there's got to be a grand reveal of someone in disguise, a chase scene, and there's got to be explosions. So those are on my list. Those are things that had to be included somewhere. And then because I want it to be a story I read over stream, I decided that it had to be like 10,000 to 15,000 words long. Like it just had to be somewhere in there. We read Prison Sage, and it was about that length, about 10,000 words even. But I want to give myself room to tell this whole story. But these will be my biggest priorities. Like, I want to focus on it being a high octane story about trespassers. I want it to be kind of a heist and spy game scenario, so I have to kind of limit my ideas and setting to these. I have a word count. I just these are me getting my priorities straight. So I don't need to build a full world. I don't need to do all sorts of crazy things. I just need to focus on these characters. So, who are the main characters? So, as I said, they don't even have names yet, but I want to have at least four characters, four quote unquote main characters. So, the first one, the male lead, is obviously going to be a debonair and dangerous pirate, because pirates are cool. The female lead was going to be an adventurous and dangerous woman who is a fake pirate, who gets mistaken as a pirate by the male lead, but is in fact a beast. And we'll go over what those terms mean after I read off of these. The first antagonist uh, is the passing gentleman. He is present to keep the pirate in line and monitor the event, so he's a third party. The Sorry, my OBS little. I'm watching the colored square on my OBS, and it keeps turning red, and I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? So, I hope the stream is looking okay. Um, I'm just gonna double check here to make sure everything's working okay. Okay, everything is working okay. So, antagonist 1 is a passing gentleman. Antagonist 2 is a crusader. Not a crusader, an executioner. Sorry, I get those mixed up. Is an executioner, maybe a crusader, but this is the first draft. This is literally like I almost straight copied and pasted this from my storyboard onto this PowerPoint, just so you'd get like the authentic feel of it. So maybe it was a crusader originally, but it's going to be an executioner. And so essentially what these things are, if you watched my debut stream and my lore stream, um, the world of trespassers is the world of isekai, the beings that go between worlds. They are called trespassers, and more often than not, they go between worlds multiple times, especially the big names. So there are factions for people who do this go between world thing. And they're all centered around this idea that there are rules that impact them um, now that they are formal trespassers. And these rules essentially determine if they get to remain immortal or not, or invulnerable or not. So even if they have quote unquote invulnerability, when from regardless of whatever world it is, because they are in a trespasser between world state, if they break the rules, it supersedes any kind of immortality and invulnerability they have. And so they can prey on each other, but they also have motivations to keep those rules. So, starting at the top would be passing gentlemen. Passing gentlemen would essentially be anyone you could easily pass on a street. Most of the rules include leaving worlds in their natural states. And so passing gentleman would leave the world as much as possible and just kind of power creep and enjoy his life and do everything. And essentially is just a tourist between worlds. Um, but because of the nature of going to multiple worlds and gaining powers, they would be very, very powerful godlike beings. Uh, but they specifically try to keep the peace and maintain those rules. They're like they're like something between a tourist and a police, I guess. A self appointed agent. I don't have an organization of passing gentlemen created yet. I haven't felt the need to make one yet, but maybe I will as some of these stories progress. We will see. After that are the pirates. Pirates follow the rules, except they play to the loopholes. They keep their invincibility and invulnerability, but they also take as much as they can while keeping the rules. They usually have big hordes somewhere. Um, Beasts would be the next most obvious answer. Beasts are essentially trespassers who completely ignore the rules, go they ignore the rules and go world to world doing whatever they want regardless of the rules. They go pillaging, plundering, stealing, killing, whoring, uh, unleashing secrets, and causing all sorts of mayhem with no regard to the natural order of that world. And executioners are essentially. Now I'm double thinking. I'm rethinking it. Were they executioners or crusaders? I'll figure that out later. I believe they were. Oh, sorry. This is so professional. But now we have to know. Okay, so they're not executioners, they are crusaders. Okay, so I have labeled her an executioner, but we will call her the proper name, which is a crusader, going forward. So she is a crusader, or they are crusaders. So crusaders, they will break the rules to kill beasts, or pirates that have become beasts. Essentially, they are the SWAT of the trespassers' worlds. So I will go back and fix those in my notes later on, but essentially those are our factions. We're going to have one of each. Those are the aggressive ones and the most interesting ones. Everyone else is just kind of doing their own thing, living peaceful lives, and trying not to get in each other's ways. At least the other trespassers. These are the ones that actively go out and make a mess of things. So, what is their setting? So, if I want it to be a high setting, it feels the most natural to put it somewhere in 21st century Earth. I want to do it with some more futuristic settings and gadgets and gizmos and what have you. So we're gonna probably, and I want to be able to have some benefit of the doubt of like I didn't get New York perfect. So somewhere closer to 2050, somewhere uh, more idyllic. Somewhere more idyllic and somewhere more kind of in ruin, maybe. But this is going to be a tech world, so maybe not cyberpunk-ish yet, but like they're going to be tech upgrades without being too foreign. So they'll still be like smartphones and things, but nothing like crazy sky hover vehicles. So that's my setting, but we got to break it down further. So where? So America, a bustling city. We got to zoom in. So we're gonna zoom in closer to New York, okay? But like where in New York, or at least a New York setting, maybe New York, who knows? But we got to really zoom in on our setting. I have all these ideas, but I have to zoom in on what matters most to my characters. So I have three locations: the art exhibit for the heist, the New York streets for the chase scene, and a rooftop for the climax. So so those are going to be my settings, my stages essentially. So, the initial plot of the story I want to tell. A rare MacGuffin is being hosted at an art gallery or expo of some kind. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to go for an art expo just to kind of keep in line with things, but it may be like a museum or a history show or something like that. Anyways, however, the gallery blows up in a terrorist attack. That is important. Both the male lead and female lead want the rare MacGuffin, so they have to steal it before it gets destroyed. Since both are trespassers, they have come from other worlds and have to follow the rules in order to obtain the item without losing their immortality. So, one of the keys to being a pirate trespasser is you can steal whatever you want if there is a future where it is destroyed. If you were to steal the Sword of Excalibur while King Arthur had it, that would be breaking the rules. But if you were to steal it later when it was returned to the lake and kind of goes into ambiguity, then you kind of can get away with it. There's kind of that gray area. You just kind of have the Excalibur, though, is kind of a hot pocket item because there's a prophecy about King Arthur coming back. So you kind of have to worry about the world you're going into, and if King Arthur is a fictional person in it, if Excalibur is real, or if Excalibur is actually going to come back with King Arthur, and there's going to be a big hullabaloo because then you got to return it by that date. But that's kind of the idea. Is you got to steal things when they're destroyed, because then no one's going to miss them. If you go and rob a bank and all the gold has gone inside the bank, and now that bank is defunct and it has all sorts of impacts everywhere, then like that's kind of a big deal. But it all depends on the natural order of the world. So there are a lot of trespassers that push that line and become beasts in the process. So, what is the plot twist? What is the plot twist I want to have? Well, after competing to get to the prize and running from the Crusader, it turns out that the female lead is actually a beast and not a pirate who is being chased by the executioner, because the male lead assumes she's a pirate because she is there to steal the same thing he is. There may even be a plot twist where the executioner, being someone who was willing to bend and break the rules to get their target, has actually hired and created the terrorist group that causes the explosion in like the attempt to take her down because they know they're going to be there. The conclusion: the pirate and beast get chased by the Crusader and get away. So those are my parts. So now that I have this story idea down, I have to put scenes together. So we're going to go back to story arcs, and we're going to build our story around what a story arc is. So for now, we're going to do some recap and a little bit more in-depth looks at what story arcs are. So there are 5 main points to a story arc, and depending on where you go and who you talk to and what you read, there are a few more that kind of get into the bits and pieces of things, or maybe a few less. These are the ones I want to talk about, and these are the ones that I'm going to include in the storyboard. So, starting at the top, exposition. Exposition, and in my own words, is an introduction to the story and gives readers information on what they need to get started. Now, this is going to include what genre it is, who are the main characters, what are the limitations of the story and the world, what their ages are. Very simple things to get you started so you know the difference between if you're in New York City, if you're in a medieval town, if you're in a sci-fi adventure, etc. Like, those are some things I believe should be included in the exposition. You should know where in the world and what world you are to get you started. Now, rising action. This will be the biggest part of your story. It is everything that culminates to the climax of the story, and in many cases, it is the largest part of the story. But events in the rising action can have mini story arcs in them, um, to help you get to that point to keep things interesting. The climax is that moment of culmination where everything kind of comes together, where bombs explode, where it's revealed you're not the cool kid, you're actually a poor person, where you're not the prince, where you're actually lying, that kind of thing. It's where everything culminates. It's where most plot twists happen, or it's where after a plot twist you go and you face down the villain who betrayed you or whatever. The falling action is going to be that wind down from the climax. It's going to be the setup for the end. It's going to be the building is exploded, and now we've saved the day. The goblins have stopped invading. The ship is now stable, and we're able to hit hyperspace and get away. It's that kind of that wind down to set up the very end, and the resolution is going to be that ending of the story. And if you're going to end the story with a catharsis where everything kind of is okay, and you kind of hit this moment of like, that was the end of the story, or where like a cliffhanger happens, depending on if you're telling it in mini arcs or big arcs, or if you're going to have a future story, or if you're going to leave room for more stories to leave a cliffhanger. So you can do either or, you can do both. It all depends on what story you're trying to tell. But those are the five of them: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. And like I said, there are many different resources for these to look at and how to build your story, and they go way more in depth into it. Um, if you want to look more into that, I highly encourage it. There are many. You could just type up story arc in Google, and it'll bring up half of the resources that I used. So, planning scenes. This is my rough throwdown. This is literally me just throwing things at a paper that I feel need to be in here and make it interesting. So, this is not a final draft by any means. These are just ideas to get to the end. So, exposition scene: coffee between pirate and gentleman, to create tension and explain why they're enemies, to explain what trespassers are and that kind of thing. And then we have to have pirate meets the beast and assumes that they are a pirate on his own. This could be that scene from the TikTok where they stare in each other's eyes and their eyes glow and they're like, "Oh, you're powerful too." And it creates this kind of awkward tension, and maybe there's a little bit of sexual tension just to kind of get things ramped up. Um, Another thing to include would be Beast investigating the art museum with the future history pulled up on one of our devices. And this would be exposition showing that the Beast is here, she's researching what's going on, and she knows it's going to explode, and she's just kind of getting laid down of the building. Those don't have to be in any particular order. This is me throwing things at a board and seeing what sticks. Now, for the rising action, as things build up to the climax, we're going to build into what the climax is. So, where is it going to happen? The art exhibition. So, what better way to start this rising action than to have a scene where the Beast and Pirate sneak into the art exhibition, and maybe they're forced to partner up with each other to collaborate, and maybe there's some attempts to sabotage each other, some playful banter going on. And then later, the pirate meets the crusader. Maybe they know the crusader, maybe they don't. If it's a spy novel, maybe we show it like they don't know the crusader, but they're actually sharing things with them. It's what it is. But they hit it off, and they're while waiting for the event to start. So that's simple. They just meet. The terrorist attack, an event that has to happen. Pirate covers the Crusader while the Beast takes advantage of the chaos and steals the MacGuffin. Still have not decided what it is. And then the chase scene, where the pirate chases the Beast, and during the chase scene, the Beast reveals that they are not a pirate. Maybe they reveal it during the chase, or maybe at the end. Whatever. And then maybe the Executioner comes in. We haven't really talked about her much, but we'll get over that later. We'll go over that later. For now, because that's for filling in the gaps in our to-do list. The climax of the story. We'll have our climax at a rooftop encounter and a fight between the pirate and the Beast. And that is where it's revealed that the pirate has led her here. Ooh. And that is when the Executioner actually shows up. The Crusader shows up to take down the Beast. And it all kind of, the plot twist was you thought the pirate was the Beast was a pirate all along? No, it's this spy double plot twist where it turns out the pirate and the Crusader, who are two parties you wouldn't ever think are working together, are working together. And it becomes all exciting, and they do all these things to take her down, and the MacGuffin is just like bait to get her. No clear resolution written down. Falling action. Another cup of tea between the pirate and the gentleman about an eventful evening. And the resolution is that the Beast picks the pirate up for a date. So, that is my rough throwdown. But there's an important thing to note. Things can change. As you develop a story, you can have more and new interesting ideas as things come up. So, here are some of the developments in progress that changed just while making the storyboard. And here's just to show that it's okay. You don't have to write a perfect storyboard the first time. You're going to throw things on a piece of paper until they work, until a full picture gets together. So, what I'm adding to the what the story I want to tell is a high octane story about trespassers and their complicated relationships. And for the conclusion, instead of the pirate and beast get chased from the crusader and get away, instead there's now an awkward sexual tension between the pirate and crusader as the female lead gets away, as the initial female lead gets away. Does the pirate manage to win anyways? It doesn't matter. He has a date with a crusader, like an actual legitimate, we're going to see a movie date. I had a time frame written up for this, and it was going to be like, what's my time frame? What am I looking at? For maybe a day minimum to a week maximum. I crossed that out, and I just put a couple of days. We're only going to need a couple of days to tell the story. The story is a short heist. There's some beginning work where they get information. There's some scenes where they have tea before and after, but essentially all of the main bulk of the story takes place at the event in the heist itself. The plot twist, the new plot twist, is that the crusader and the pirate actually end up getting together instead of the female lead. So there's actually a new female lead. So the double plot twist comes out. So while you're making a storyboard, keep in mind you can change things. And this is just an example of some of the things that I made while creating the storyboard itself. So don't get super hung up on this, because this is going to change as you write it. As you develop the story, things are going to change. They're going to grow. They're going to become better. They're going to become... Some things are going to completely fall away, and you're going to have new scenes coming out of it. So don't be afraid of developments. So this is where I'm taking a huge risk, because this is where I include images that are not mine. But images I thought encapsulated my characters. So we have 4 main characters, and we'll go over them. But I created like a short, like, what do I need to go over? What do I need to know about these main characters in just my outline format? And so I came up with 5 qualifiers of things that I need to know, and I put them in order of importance. So we will go over them. Let me get a drink first. For those of you who don't know, yes, I have been talking for 15 minutes. Allow me to get my drink. So, going over character outlines, my 5 most important things are going to be things I talked about in the last stream, so I decided to go over them. Motivation, why they're there. Their flaw, essentially what makes them interesting. Their conflict, what conflict of theirs is happening in the story that they need to tell. Their appearance, what is signature about it, what do I need to remember, just for the sake of getting started. And their lore, their background. Now, I know I put this at the bottom and last just to make a point that we all want to create oodles and oodles and oodles of lore for our characters before we get started. The problem with that is that there is only so much lore that's going to fit in a short story format. So you want to keep it pretty basic. What is the lore what is the lore that you need to get across is kind of the point in this segment. What is the lore here that needs to come across, or what is any lore I have available in some of these cases. So, this is your last minute to take a guess of who is who, but I also noticed that when I created this image and I put these characters together, that if you go from like right to left, they all kind of coincide with their color scheme with like the 4 elements. So you have on the left that the white-haired girl, that's fire, the blue-suited guy is water, the brown-haired guy is earth, and the green-haired girl is is wind. It all kind of like flows and looks really kind of cool that way. That was not intentional. These are just characters I thought would encapsulate the characters I was talking about, to kind of give them the best like visuals to help me as a writer. These are not going to be images that I'm going to try to make money off of. These are just images that are there to inspire inspire development within the characters themselves. So, first one. So, the first character, the male lead of the story, is going to be Northeast, or Nicodemus Eldersight. So, he is a pirate and he wants the MacGuffin. Very, very simple motivation for being there. This is not including all of the lores and double plot twists and everything. This is just me throwing things on a paper to try to fill up as many boxes as possible. What is his flaw? For now, his flaw is that he assumes Sepharina is a pirate like himself, and Sepharina is the female lead. The conflict: both Nicodemus and Sepharina want the MacGuffin, but there is a limited time frame to obtain it. He is a villain, is in appearance like a gambler, and has very pretty green eyes. In the lore, he is one of the four winds, who are the four most famous pirates, and he has super special green eyes. And some of the lore for his green eyes that I've decided is that they are crystalline, and that if you see them for a glance, they just look like normal green eyes. But if you were to like get up and look at them, the closer you look at these eyes, the more crystalline they become, and the more fracks and cracks and crags and different shades you'll see. Almost like, is it one diamond or is it 1,000 diamonds? And if it's just like one diamond from far away, but the closer you look at it, you just see thousands and thousands and thousands of diamonds, like reflectively looking back and forth, like a not a lodestone. Anyways, like one of those gemstones. It has just a bunch of crystals inside of it. Um, I haven't decided what powers that has, but that is a lore moment for later. Uh, the female lead is Sepharina Dorovich, and she is assumed to be a pirate. Her motivation is that she's a beast and wants the MacGuffin, so she is willing to break the rules to get it. Almost the most classic case of femme fatale in all existence. Her flaw is that she's a beast and allows Nicodemus to believe what he wants. The conflict is that both of them want the MacGuffin. Her appearance is that she has short white hair, and her lore is that she is the first beast revealed. So any lore I make for her will be unique and either reveal all beasts always or just her beast lore specifically. And yes, this is a picture of someone's fan art Jedi Sith person, and will I give her a lightsaber? I have considered it. I have thought about making the joke like, a lightsaber? Really? We don't have the copyright to that inside the story itself. But that is her. She will have short white hair. That is her important feature. She will have those slanted villainous eyes, the body of a femme fatale, and have dark clothes. To be able to move around with, so she can get to the event and get away. Our passing gentleman is Aloysius Davenport, or Aloysius, depending on who you are and how you pronounce it. This is a character I've created in the past, and I decided just to insert him here, just for the sake of including him in the story. I didn't really want to create a different passing gentleman, so I just put him in there. He wants to keep pirates in check, especially the Four Winds, which makes him one of the most powerful passing gentlemen. His flaw is that he cannot interact without rule breaking. He is bound by the rules because he's a passing gentleman, so he will follow them. Classic good guy cop move. Conflict, kind of the same. He's there to keep order and maintain it in case the group of trespassers like screw things up and go to war. He's there to kind of keep things to maintain the natural order of things as best as he can. His appearance, he looks like a young, handsome, like not like a nobleman or keep wanting to use like 7th century terms, like a nobleman or a inheritor of a company. He just looks handsome and is well dressed and all sorts of things. And I didn't have any lore to put down here in my short notes, so I just left the conflict and lore blank. because I'm just throwing things at a paper. I don't have to complicate things by uh, filling out every box in a rough draft. I don't have to do that, and I just want to show that that's not something you have to force on yourself. So this is our executioner, or specifically our crusader. This is Devoted Lancaster, and she is her motivation is to kill the beast. Very, very Gaston-esque, kill the beast. Her flaw, maybe that she's a Kuderi. I kind of like the idea of making her a Kuderi, but I don't know if that's a flaw or not. Um, I guess I didn't really have anywhere to put the conflict or blah. I didn't know how to write the conflict just because she's not a background character, but kind of also does sit in the background. She's not a main character, but is the antagonist. I guess the conflict is that she chases the beast. Um, Her appearance to make note of, her green hair and her glasses. I would also I like the idea of her using a compound bow and having it be like supercharged with mystical powers in order to kill the beast. Um, and her lore is that she's the first executioner revealed, the first crusader that we have. And one thing I have to come up with in my to-do list is to figure out the lore of the crusaders. And so we will actually get into that. But these are going to be our four main characters, the characters that the story revolves around, to kind of show this complex dynamic between the trespassers and their factions. And like I said, these are going to be all multiple isekai worlders. Like these people have stockpiled powers and have gone to multiple worlds, and we want to show that in the story itself. So that will be included in the content, or at the very least be hinted at. So, my to-do list. Like I said, I have to first of all, now at the top of my to-do list, I have to call them crusaders, not executioners. um, I have to fix that. I have to rewrite that in the storyboard, and I have to make mental note to not confuse those again. Um, but executioner lore or crusader lore, and more specifically devoted lore, like we want to look at this girl and this image and see what we can divine just from the image details and see if we can get any inspiration on what I can glean from this picture, and then what I can glean from my own imagination. So I'll look at this picture a lot, and one thing I wanted to, some ideas I had come across were, am I going to create a Crusader home base? Do the Crusaders create more Crusaders? Are there families of Crusaders? Is she like a legacy Crusader? Is this something that Crusaders would prioritize, or because they can break the rules to like field their armies of anti beast hunters? Or does she have her own reason for being a crusader? Does she like to keep order? Was she burned by other beasts? Is there a reason? Does she have a vendetta against them? Or does she have a vendetta against Sephirina Durovich specifically? Is there some kind of chip on her shoulder for the villain, or is she just her latest mark? So those are some details that I have to iron out in my own time and figure out, and maybe will even be figured out while I'm writing the story. But the next thing I'd have to do would be beast lore about Sephirina. Sephirina, and I have to say her name right. Um, is there a reason she is a beast? Is she a beast because she was burned? Is she a beast because she has a laissez-faire attitude? Did she interact with Devoted in a past time skip or whatever? And is there some bad blood between them, or is she just got bad blood with everyone and is just kind of everyone's enemy? So I have to flesh out Devoted, and I have to add at least one more scene about her, and maybe in the introduction. So I have to go back to planning scenes, and I have to put one more in with her. I also have to flesh out the MacGuffin. What is the MacGuffin? Why is it so important? Why do Sephirina and Nicodemus, why do they want it? What's the big deal about it? Is it going to be an artifact that changed everything, or is it an artifact that has strictly uh, sentimental value, or is it a material value object, something that's going to be very pricey, or is it just one more thing to steal? So I have to flesh out what that is. I have to add one more scene somewhere in the middle there between. Oh, excuse me. Uh, Aloysius. All right, so I've been calling him Aloysius this whole time. Aloysius, which makes sense to me. But if you watch a specific Dr. Seuss movie, there is a short villain character named Aloysius who is the same name. Um, for my sake, I'm gonna call him Aloysius, just because that's how I've always known him, and I'm gonna catch heat for it. But Aloysius and one more character, so I have to add one more scene somewhere where the passing gentleman interacts with another character to show the dynamic, to flesh it out. And then I have to flesh out what powers or skills I'm going to showcase. How powerful am I going to make them? How broken do I make them? How much destruction is going to happen versus how much do they hold back for the sake of maintaining the rules? So obviously, the beast would probably go all out with their powers, where the pirate would have more subtle tricks to maintain the natural order of the rule, depending on what the beast throws at him. Also, what is Aloysius's powers for maintaining the order of the event, and what are our while still letting the explosion happen and the tragedy happen? Because it's a terrorist event, they blow up the building. And then, what powers does Devoted have to use to kill beasts? Specifically, what's her beast killing super move? So those are some things I have to work out, find inspiration for, and jot down notes and flesh out, either while I'm writing it or like ahead of time. I want to do an opening scene with all four characters, and then most importantly, I have to come not most importantly, very importantly, I have to come up with a title for the whole shebang. What do I call this grand heist short story? Is it just Tales of the Trespassers, episode 1? Is it Northeast Arrives? Is it The Beast Escapes? Is it like what? And so I'll probably have a working title just to start, and probably just leave it as Tales of the Trespassers for now, and then create a more specific title once I've gotten more of the story fleshed out and written down, and I can kind of nail down a little bit more about this grand adventure heist. So, that specifically is my to do list. And if we're going to cover some of this stuff on the next stream, is all going to depend on, like, I'd like to get somewhere started, and I'd like to have like a writing stream where I have like I hook up my microphone to my over my keys and have like an ASMR stream as I'm writing things down, or just have a writing stream where I write and talk about what's going on. But I think it'd be better suited for the ASMR stream. I don't like to really talk while I'm writing, I lose focus. But kind of nail everything down and get like the characters in a setting and get a story going. So I haven't decided what we're gonna do next week, but I didn't decide what we were gonna do this week until Tuesday. So my first scene. Where do I start? What is my hook? Do I make it this for the prologue or for the hook? This is a scene that I'm gonna throw into the planning scenes, and that's why it wasn't there beforehand, because everything is still in development. Um, I want to show off a scene where I spelled her name wrong again. I keep wanting to call her Serafina. It's Seth Farina, where she's investigating the MacGuffin at the Ark exhibit. sometime in the past before the event, and then shows off her ability to time travel. The scene will reveal the future explosion, the terrorist events, and what will destroy the MacGuffin in the building. And I could either make this the prologue, where like it's just a short scene about Sephirina, where she's looking around and looks at the object or looks at the setting, and then has like a her phone out where she scrolls through her smartphone about the event, but it's a different date that's not today. So just kind of a tease at some future explosion and death, almost like what I did with Pearly City. But at the same time, like if I'm going to make this a story for a live reading, um, I don't know if I really can do a prologue. Maybe I just have to do a hook or like do a prologue and then cut to another character, and then kind of like I'm doing a prologue only really works when you have like a writing setup down. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, do I make this a prologue or not? Or even if I can make this a prologue or not. So this may just be the hook. So next thing I have to do is just to begin writing. And then it just comes to ironing out the details while stitching together sentences. And this is going to go for anyone when you're writing. At a certain point, you really just got to put your nose to the grindstone and your pen to paper and your fingers to keyboard and get something written out. And like I said, you got to do your first chapter before you can do your last chapter. So you're going to have to write something down before you can get to any kind of middle ground where things are happening. And also, these are all just the basics. So don't get hung up on ironing everything out right before beginning, because some things change in the process. So you don't worry about getting your storyboard 100% correct and ironed out, because if you do, if you spend all that time making your storyboard absolutely perfect and you start writing and you come along a hitch where like your characters' motivations and things are starting to conflict with your story, which sounds crazy, but if you get into writing and you start to write what these characters are doing, what their motivations are, like you really start to get a feel of like how things can go into left field and how maybe your storyboard isn't going to be 100% correct. I've made storyboards in the past where things did not go 100% correct. Um, for Tales of the Pearly City, the ending of book 2, I had 1,000 different ways I wanted it to end. The original way I wanted book to end was a bit more tragic and a bit more like he had the ending boss fight destroyed the city, and the main characters essentially ended on a cliffhanger where they left this burning city behind. Like, but now it's completely changed. It's completely different, and so don't get caught up in making your storyboard and your intentions like 100% perfect. As you write, things will flesh themselves out, and they will get better if you let them. And if you're like, oh, Captain, that's so confusing. Everything you've talked about this whole time is so impossible, and I'll never be able to do a storyboard. It's so hard, and you've made it so complicated. These are screenshots of my storyboard that we've gone over. It's 2 and maybe a quarter pages of just like things I wrote down and answered questions for myself. Like, this is it. This is the whole storyboard, like seen on paper that it was inceptioned on. Like, that's it. Everything we talked about, almost deliberately copied and pasted from this. Um, you can see the section, what are the characters, the female leads. Even there it has the Crusader and the Beast. I even added the terrorist group in here, but I didn't include that in the slideshow, just because like we don't know if they're going to be main characters or not. It's just a group, and we don't know how important they're going to be other than just creating the event where everything explodes. Um, I got the characters all written down. Um, hopefully they all have names. Their names are correct. correct. But yeah, this is literally all it took to storyboard. A page and a half, and some of you are like, oh, but it took you so long to do this. Okay, yes. It took me 6 hours to write this piece of paper. But I was at work, doing work things, and it's been a lot of the time where I wasn't working or writing, staring off into space, just imagining things that I needed, and then the rest of the time writing it down. So you could, and in 6 hours, that's not even a day. That's between classes, you could get a storyboard written. And if we go back to some of the early storyboards that I wrote, they took not even 10 minutes. This is only took that long just because I wanted to have I wanted to formulate not only just the storyboard itself, but I wanted to get a format going. So part of those hours were spent like just making the format work. So, what are my takeaways? What are these things that you have to know now that we've had this class? Now that you've learned a storyboard, experiment. There are all sorts of storyboard ways that you can do and take things and da 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 da. Like, there is no right, perfect one way to do it. This is just an example of one thing that I did this one time, and also examples of one things that I did other times. You can do it this way if it helps you, and you can do it the other ways if they help you. You really just gotta do it through trial and error until you get it right, or until you find something that works. But not everything is gonna work for everything. I thought about this example while I was thinking about this part. Is like um, making mac and cheese. Writing a story is like making mac and cheese. And you're like, oh, Captain, but making mac and cheese is perfect every time. And I'm like, is it? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that like Kraft and Kroger mac and cheese taste differently. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that the flavors and consistency change depending on how much butter and milk you put in them. And then everyone has their own preferences on additives to mac and cheese. Like if you were going to buy a box of mac and cheese, like 8 times out of 10, you buy the box to just eat the mac and cheese as it is. But those other couple times, you're gonna put something in it. Maybe you're gonna put bacon. Maybe you're gonna put hot dogs. Maybe you're gonna put spam. Maybe you're gonna put ham. Maybe you're gonna put sausages. And then what are the extra spices you're gonna put in it? I like to put Tony's Creole seasoning in my mac and cheese. Give it a little bit of spice and kick. Change the flavor a little bit. Make it a little bit more savory. I like to put spam in my mac and cheese, but not always. And specifically, I like to put like strips of spam and not hunks of spam. I like to be able to choose when I eat them. There are people that make mac and cheese with actual cheese, and they'll make things in a pot, in a pan, or whatever, and mix different ways to make different cheeses together. They'll put like maybe 3 or 6 different types of cheese in a pan, melt it down, and put them on uh, elbows, or maybe some people will do uh, other pastas, to put cheese on. Nothing wrong with any of those. They're all different flavors, different savors. Some people like white cheese with bacon, and some people like to add other things like fried chicken, or put it in a pan and add crumbs on top of it and bake it. So theoretically, yes, yes, there's there's a there's one good way to make Kraft mac and cheese with the instructions it gives you on the box. If you follow those directions, it'll taste exactly like it tells you to taste. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to make mac and cheese. That doesn't mean that's the only set of instructions out there for good mac and cheese. And you could like baked mac and cheese, or maybe you hate white cheddar and bacon mac and cheese, which is, I don't understand. But if maybe you're vegetarian and you don't like bacon on your mac and cheese, there are all sorts of ways, and it's just like storyboarding. There are all sorts of instructions for how to storyboard and how to tell a story, but you never really understand which flavor of mac and cheese that you like the best until you've tried them all. You can theoretically like baked mac and cheese, or like mild or spicy mac and cheese, or like white mac and cheese with bacon, or like spam and cheese, or like mac and cheese with sliced up hot dogs, or uh, mac and cheese bowls with all sorts of extra fantastic ingredients on them. You never know which one you're going to like best until you try them all. So storyboard and write, and you should have fun with it. You should be able to experiment with these. That should be the fun part of writing, is not just telling a great story, but having this journey of experimentation and growth as a writer as you go upon this journey. Sure, your stories aren't going to be perfect, and sure, you're going to make the mistake that I made where you put water and oil instead of butter and milk in mac and cheese, and it's going to taste like a terrible slimy mess. It's going to happen, but you learn from those mistakes and you grow and you make better pots of mac and cheese. You don't uh, ever put oil in it again. You do things like you would add Creole seasoning to it, or maybe salt and pepper, or garlic powder, or your own add all seasonal rub seasoning that you put on your ribs. You also put that on your mac and cheese. Maybe you put your mac and cheese on burgers. You just gotta have fun with it. Just like it's hard to not have fun with mac and cheese. It's delicious. Unless you hate pasta or hate carbs or whatever, mac and cheese has gotta be one of the best Western foods invented. It's very delicious. I wouldn't put it in my top 10, but I would put it in my top 20 for sure. There's a lot of good foods. As always, your homework. Now that you've had an example of how to storyboard, now that you've had me tell you you can do it, write. Write more. Write down all your ideas, big and small, plot them out and share your stories. You should share your stories on Wattpad, but you shouldn't share them for the sake of getting super famous and having everyone like you and how great you are. You should share them for the sake of, this is something I worked hard on and I want to put it out in the world somewhere. And if someone enjoys it, that's awesome. But I enjoyed it first, you know? And maybe not everyone's going to come and flock to your story. Maybe not everyone is going to call you a super genius. But it's, as I've said in the past, if you can find someone who's going to tell you what you're going to do, what you're doing wrong, and tells you how to fix it, maybe that's the kind of criticism you need to make your stories better and to continue forward. But you should write, you should love it, and you should write more. Writing is a skill, and you can never get started if you never get started. And then for me, mine is the to-do list that we talked about earlier, and to begin writing out the story. Up to this point, the story has been 2 days in the making, and I have had not nearly enough time to stare at the ceiling and look at random pictures to come up with other inspirations on how to fill up the gaps of the story. So I will go ahead and do some of that stuff. So, an hour and 20 minutes, we have hit our what's it called? We have hit our time frame for today. If there's anyone in chat who has any questions, come now or forever hold your peace. I do know that I have hosted this a couple times, and some people have had trouble with the chat. Some people just aren't here. And some people don't stay the whole time. Some people just have things to do, classes to have, and they can't fit their light around the streams. So, alright. Well, I don't want to sit here in silence forever and a half. So for now, I just want to say that thank you all for coming. Thank you all who have been here and dipped, and thank you all who have lurked, stayed here to the end, and thank you all who go back and watch the VOD. I will post this on there later, so you can watch it as many times as you want later. Have it on the background. Listen to the soft and silky sounds of my voice as I tell you how amazing you are, and how great I am, and how fantastic my stories are. But for now, and always, may the winds of fortune ever fill your sails. Thank you.